Good afternoon and welcome to Ecobot's webinar series on the convergence of wetland science and technology. Today's edition focuses on field applications. Our moderator is Jeremy Schewe, the Chief Scientific Officer at Ecobot. He also has 18 years experience in the wetland scientists industry and is a member of the Society of Wetland Science. We also have a panel of experts today who will be with us, joining Jeremy, and will help us dive deeply into this topic. They are all, as I said, experts in the field and well-versed in the area of field applications. I want to encourage everyone to ask questions. We've got a Q&A button down at the bottom in Zoom. Feel free to throw questions in there throughout the presentation and the discussion. And Jeremy and the panelists will do their best to address them as they come in. And with that, I will toss it over to Jeremy to get started. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for joining us here today. We're having a nice, cool day here in the Southern Appalachian Mountains. We actually had to close the windows last night and put another blanket on the bed. So I know some of you are still toasty where you are. So if you need a little cool down, come visit. But 6 feet away from me. Anyways, I guess I also want to thank Kim and Society for Wetland Scientists again for leveraging me into this position where somehow I keep sitting in front of people and sharing what we as wetland scientists love to dive into and get excited about. So just if you don't know anything, if you're not involved with Society for Wetland Scientists, highly suggest looking into it. And if you're not a professional wetland scientist yet, talk to Kim. She's going to be in charge of that this year. So yeah, so thank you to all of the panelists and presenters for joining us here today and the expert experience that you bring to the table. We have a great group today. We have a smaller group than we had with our first webinar a little over a month ago. We wanted to do 2 things today. One, several of the panelists are also going to be presenting as part of our conversation today. So you're not going to just hear case studies in relationship to projects that I've worked on with technology and hardware, but you're going to hear it from other consultants as well as regulatory agents. So our topic, of course, today is field applications. We sent out a survey after our last webinar, and 70% of the people who attended that said that they were highly interested in hearing more about field applications in respect to wetland science. So that's what brings us to where we are today. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Pull that up. All right, so we're going to have about 35 minutes of presentation, slides, case studies, etc. And then at the end, we will have about 25 minutes for a panel discussion, as well as for any of you who are in attendance to ask questions. And you can use either the Q&A section, you can use the Q&A section below to send those to you, and then Mike, as our host, will be able to kind of filter through those and get those over to us as panelists. And then I would like to just invite that any questions that come during the conversation, if any panelists feel like you want to answer those, feel free to do those in the that typing section. So this is what we're going to take a look at today. We're going to just reiterate the importance of the digitization of data. I'm going to do a brief introduction of all the panelists and presenters, look at some of the new ecosystems for wetland science, and then we're going to actually get into the wetland field apps and specifically to these 4 case studies. We're going to look at iNaturalist, which of course is about species identification and observations, Collector, Survey 123, and Ecobot, and then we'll have a brief plug for the next webinar following that. So I know William Pollard made it into our last webinar as well, so I promise Then in the next one, I'll find another source of some distinguished philosopher or naturalist that that I will kick us off with here. But again, like, I really feel like these words ring true across time. Complacency, acceptance, looking away, while it can be comfortable and easy to the beholder, are also a recipe for stagnation. And I postulate arrogance and bullishness as well. The nature and the dynamic balance found between chaos and order are a constant reminder to us of the importance of being able to look at things with fresh eyes, to reevaluate how we are assessing things. And they also remind us to be malleable, to be flexible, especially in light of recent COVID-19 pandemic and a lot of the racial tensions that have built up over the last few weeks. We're reminded how important it is to be able to adapt. The seas are rising, and whatever source of that you may believe that that's coming from, it's happening, and we need to be ready for it. In our last webinar, I spent probably 3 or 4 slides talking about the importance of digitizing data. I believe it is our critical role that we as scientists fill. We ascend biological and abiological data from the earth, from our observations, from what we see in the field, and put it into a format that impacts policy. It impacts decision-making around planning, and it helps with the interpretation of what's going on in the world for the non-scientists. And a lot of our observations have gotten lost over time. I don't know how many bankers' boxes I have of data sitting in various warehouses with organizations that I have worked through in the past. And so the convergence of wetland science and technology is an opportunity. It empowers us as scientists to not only fulfill our critical role as scientists, but also to gather lasting data that can aid with resilience planning, landscape level policy formation, low impact development, the conservation, preservation, and promulgation of our natural resources. As scientists, we build the bridge between biology and technology. We give a voice to the voiceless. And our voices are needed in this time more than ever. Here's our amazing panelists that we have today. I've come to really deeply respect each of these people for what they stand for and what they represent in the world. Scott Denham, I've only known for a little over a year, but he's a wetlands and permitting manager at Environmental Solutions and Innovations based out of Ohio. He has over 7 years of experience with the environmental consulting industry, through wetland science, environmental compliance, environmental permitting, wetland restoration, mitigation, and project management. Now, Kim has a CV and a bio that not only is 10 times longer than anybody else I know. I'm also trying, I've promised her that I'm going to turn it into a ballad before our next webinar, so maybe we can sing it. But she is currently one of the lead wetland scientists with the St. John's River Water Management District in Northeast Florida, working in wetland restoration, management, and preserving marsh habitats. She also has served commendable roles with Society for Wetland Sciences and has recently been elected president for the PWS certification program, as I spoke to earlier. Bridget is newer in my sphere, and I've really enjoyed the conversations I've been having with her. She's the lead geospatial analyst with HDR in their Mid-Atlantic region. She has over 8 years of experience with data management, geospatial solutions, and project management, and she's based in Richmond, Virginia. And then Jeff Ingebritsen is a GIS specialist and team lead with the Fish and Wildlife Service based in Wisconsin, works with the National Wetland Inventory. She essentially helps create all the shape files for all of the wetland units that we as consultants and regulators are using every day for our planning and assessments. And he's based in Madison, Wisconsin. Also joining us today are Daniel and Darren of Esri and Trimble, respectively. I asked them to join the panel because of their expertise with GIS software and GPS hardware, and they can help to answer technical questions, etc., that you might have in the audience, as well as on the panel. Daniel is a consultant and project manager with Esri. The focus in natural resources and geodesign projects. And his projects include ecology and riparian restoration projects or enhancements, pyrogeography, which I'm excited to learn more about that, natural resource management, wildlife management, and real estate investment via the mitigation industry. So, and he hails from Redlands, California. And Darren Laux is a regional sales manager at the Trimble Navigation, who has been extremely helpful in my own understanding of GPS receiver capabilities, as well as vernacular. He also plays a strong role in development of case studies around new hardware and software pairing, and he hails from Seattle, Washington as his home. So let's take a brief look at the new ecosystem or ecosystems for wetland science. This is why we're here today. The dovetailing of technology and wetland science is evolving into one of its own ecosystems in its own right. An ecosystem of inter-supporting tools that improve all of our workflows, lives, as well as data management. Most of us, I will boldly presume, have an understanding of the web of life, of ecosystems. An ecosystem is defined as a community of living organisms in conjunction with their abiotic or non-living components. Yet, also, it is in respect to how they're linked together through the nutrient cycle and energy flows. So the interwoven relationship of hardware and software is often referred to also as an ecosystem. The metaphor works for me. The hardware and software are linked together through nutrient cycles and energy flows of data, information. So again, we help to ascend that information as biologists, as scientists. What we see in the field helps to put it into a digital format, which then helps us to make better policy and better planning. So as in wetland science, besides our new computers, this is something a model of what our new ecosystem looks like. Here's all the interchangeable parts. And like organisms in an ecosystem, each one of these parts needs one another. So thus the cross-breeding lines. I'll have to say that when we were making this slide, Lee made a whole train of satellites going up, and I said, no, we're not putting up one of Elon Musk's trains up there. We're gonna move on from that one. So in wetland science here, I think we're talking about the droids that you're looking for today. And in order to best present the suite of tools that we're going to be looking at today, specifically field applications, I did take some time to interview Jeremy Kenobi, and so for the next 20 minutes, we're going to have the opportunity to listen to some of our presenters from our panel team here and regulatory experts and consultants to share some of their case studies from their respective field apps. So from the field application side of things, again, we're going to be looking at iNaturalist, Collector, Survey 123, and Ecobot. And there'll be plenty of time at the end for conversations. Also, like I said, we've got Darren on here from Trimble, and here are some of the other EOS and SX and Juniper are some of the other devices that a lot of the people who are working with Ecobot, as well as some of the other field applications that we're going to be talking about, are pairing with, so that they can get the level of sub-meter accuracy that they're looking for. Let's take a look at our case studies. Now's when I get to to share this conversation. So we're going to start off with Kim.
Thanks, Jeremy, for inviting me to be part of the webinar panel today. Just a little information about my background. I am a wetland scientist, and I've been working for the St. Johns River Water Management District for over 31 years. The district's mission is to protect water resources in the state of Florida through 4 core missions: water supply, water quality, flood protection, and natural systems. And that's where my main focus is in natural systems. We have hundreds of thousands of acres of wetlands to assess, manage, and preserve. And in doing that, we use a number of tools that I've listed here, from water monitoring and sampling devices, GPS, ArcGIS, several maps out in the field, and biological sampling devices, but also apps that are easy to have field collection data. And so one of the ones I want to introduce is the iNaturalist app. And this is sort of your entryway or gateway app into this field collection world. The purpose of the iNaturalist app is to connect a network of naturalists, citizen scientists, and biologists that want to map and share observations of plants and animals around the globe. And you can utilize the app for conducting bioblitzes or inventories, cataloging species distributions, and I particularly like to use it as an aid in species identifications as a learning tool. And ultimately, you'll use it for resource sharing. And you can make the geographic locations of the data as public or as private as you wish. So perhaps you have a known location of protected species listed in threatened and endangered species. And so you can go ahead and mask that geographic location. And the data takes no space on your devices because it's all online and it's literally at your fingertips. So this is a short tutorial that comes from iNaturalist app on how to make observations. You can find this on the website.
Okay, so you've installed the iNaturalist app and created an account. Time to get outside and record your first observation. Here's how to do it. Any living thing, like a plant, animal, or fungus, can be an observation on iNaturalist. Once you find something you'd like to record, just tap Observe and take a photo. You can review your picture, then hit Next if it looks good. To identify it, hit What did you see? If you have an internet connection, iNaturalist will suggest 10 visually similar species and often a common ancestor. You can choose one of those or search for a species name. On this observation details screen, you can add more photos of the same organism or write a note. The date, time, and location have been automatically added. You can also change the geoprivacy of the observation, mark whether it's captive or cultivated, or add it to a project. Once you're finished, just hit Share and your observation will be uploaded for everyone to see and identify. That's it. Keep on exploring and sharing.
So you can see that this is a pretty easy app to use, and it's available both on your mobile devices and an expanded version on your desktop. There is an extensive collaborative database, and I do mean extensive. I'm going to show you an email where I was alerting my coworkers to this app back in March of last year. It is, at that point in time, had over 16 million observations, 450,000 observers, and 200,000 species that were documented all over the world. But that was in March of 2019, and now a little over a year later, there are over 40 million observations, nearly 300,000 species documented by over 1 million observers. And all of your observations are vetted by experts, and your observation, if it's verified by several identifiers, can be upgraded to what they call research grade, and it's completely free. Your observations can also be added to projects, like this observation of the queen butterfly that I had in the Bull Creek Wildlife Management Area. You can see that both Bull Creek Wildlife Management Area and Pollinators of Florida, both projects by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, went ahead and added my observation of this queen butterfly to their projects. And I took a little video of my own to show you, kind of what it's like, and we'll just take a quick look at that. So what I did here is click the app, and down in the bottom right hand side of the screen there's a little green plus button. I'll do that and tell it that I'm going to go ahead and take a photo of a plant outside. I take a photo and I hit the OK button, and then what I do is hit that What Did You See View Suggestions button. And it's going to come up with 10 of the best suggestions that are visually similar. And I can see that I like the Egyptian star cluster, so I'll go ahead and pick that. And what I'll get to do is I'll get to see if I do a comparison, I can see my image and compare it to other images of this particular species. And I see that looks pretty good. It compares pretty well visually. So I'll go back and I can find out more information about the Egyptian star cluster. You can see some information on where it's located, its seasonality, and then you can go even down into the more info that will go onto the website. Of course, you have to have internet connection. And then I wanted to make sure that this is seen in the area in Florida and Gainesville, and you can see there that this is not an unrealistic observation for me. So I'll just go back and I'm going to say, well, I'll pick that one and say that that's what this is. Then I'm going to pick on location, and I'm going to tell it to get my current location, and you'll see that it puts the lat long of my home. And also I'm going to click that Is It Captive or Cultivated button because this is an ornamental plant in my backyard. I'll also click that check button, and now I am ready it'll sync up, and I'll be ready to share my observations with the community. So I mentioned being part of a project, that one of the other things you can do is you can go to the community tab and look at all the different projects that are available to join. You could even make one of your own. This is one that just happened this past weekend. It was called the Socially Distant BioBlitz. And I believe this just was all over the world. And so this is something to catalog species all on one day. So this is a very robust app for participation all over the world. And I'm going to tell you that this app, I found it helpful at my work in wetland restoration and conservation. And a lot of that is to do with identification of species. But I've also used things that I have documented in earlier photographs back from 2007 or so from the Bull Creek Wildlife Management Area. And I've entered those into this observation database. And someone asked us about whether or not we could download this data. And you can get a download. You put in search criteria and get a download of a CSV file to bring into Excel spreadsheet. So I can download all of my 200 and some observations that I've done, which is a drop in the bucket compared to some other observers on this app. So that's one thing. And then personally, I'm not going to lie, I am absolutely addicted to cataloging everything that I see. And even I just take a walk around the neighborhood or in my backyard, and I'm constantly capturing biota to take pictures of and add to the community's database. So that's the iNaturalist app, and you can find more information at that website listed on the bottom of the slide. And one last thing, did I mention that it is completely free? All right, thank you.
So let's bring Jeff in next from Fish and Wildlife Service. You ready, Jeff?
Hello, I am ready.
Thank you.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. So hi, I'm Jeff. I'm a GIS specialist with the National Wetlands Inventory. And so we, we're a national spanning data set of wetlands polygons, and mostly we create those by looking at aerial imagery and basically drawing them. So unfortunately, we don't get to go out in the field as much as any of us would prefer. But when we do, or when we get to send people out in the field on our behalf, we've been starting to use mobile devices more and more. This particular instance that I'll be talking about is for our every 10 years stats and trends study. We map the change in wetlands in 5,048 2-square-mile polygons across the nation. I wasn't around for the last one, but I know that they weren't using collector on iPads for it. This picture in particular is from drone footage in Louisiana, which also wasn't part of the 2004 to 2009 study. If we can go to the next one. So as I said, there's over 5,000 plots. They're distributed across the nation by Hammond ecoregion, I believe. And we have 7 different cooperators that go out and visit these plots, or at least a percentage of them, to check if the aerial signature they're seeing matches what is actually on the ground. My life as the data manager for this project has been made much easier by using ArcGIS Online and Collector. I get to create some field photo and field data point template layers. Our cooperators get to go fill them in with information that's relevant for them to make their line work correct, or more correct-ish. But then I also get to look at the data on ArcGIS Online. We get to get those photos for all of our QC processing. We also get to keep those photos when they send in the raw images in case they're beautiful enough that we want to include them in the report. And so just in terms of tracking data, distributing and getting data back, I don't have to deal with mailing out hard drives. I don't have to deal with FTP logins and distributing the correct logins. It's all just up on ArcGIS Online as soon as they get back to the hotel and get back on wireless. We can go to the next slide, Jeremy. So in terms of directly impacting my work, so I began my career as an archaeologist, and I remember the joy of filling out photo logs and correcting photo logs if you get one off or whatever. And I don't have to worry about that at all with this. Is every point is linked to 1 to 4 photos, depending on how artistic they're feeling on the field that day. It's just everything has become more efficient. The potential problems with transferring this data are lessened. I want to say removed. But just in terms of getting field points to help us complete this study and measure the wetland change across the United States, it's been really useful to have Collector for ArcGIS and using ArcGIS Online. We had a kickoff meeting in 2017 where we were kind of introducing this concept to the cooperators, and I think a few of them still also bring out some paper and pencil and a printed out map. But even since then, the new version of Collector was released by Esri, and it's a really good improvement. So if I'm still around for the next status and trend study, I'm sure that we're going to be using even more mobile data platforms, processes, workflows. But so far, it's become a really integral part of our process, even in the last 2 years. That's what I've got, Jeremy.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Certainly appreciate it. So, well, let's go next. We're going to go to Bridget with HDR.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. So, hi, everyone. I'm Bridget Wagner. So I work at HDR. I'm the Mid-Atlantic Geospatial Lead. Jeremy had kind of already gone over all that. Just a quick background on HDR. We are an employee-owned architecture, engineering, construction firm. Oh, yeah, there you go. So we were established in 1917, which feels like a pretty big deal for a private firm being over 100 years old. We do have, international coverage and presence. And we are an Esri business partner, so we really do utilize this whole suite of Esri online software. A lot of like what was just presented with Collector. So we do have the online specialty designation because we do have a lot of proven processes for how we implement this for our clients and internally for ourselves. So in terms of our environmental sciences and planning group, we do have over 1,000 environmental professionals throughout the company. And in specific regards to leveraging this geospatial technology, we're using all of this Esri software as well as some custom applications for, a few examples are just these wetland delineations, analyses, habitat assessments, compliance monitoring surveys. I mean, you name it, anything in this environmental field, we are trying to leverage the Esri platform to the fullest extent. And, in this case, I'm just going to go over an example where we heavily utilized, I think, Survey 123 to the maximum extent possible. So you can go to the next one. So there is really one big case study here that I wanted to use for Survey 123, just to really emphasize the power of this commercial off-the-shelf solution. So this was for our contract for the Hurricane Maria damage assessments in Puerto Rico. So we, Hurricane Maria struck Puerto Rico September 2017, and it damaged the entire island. So a couple of years later, jumped to 2019, the FHWA started issuing contracts to assess the damages on the island. And we were fortunate to win one of those contracts and assess 81 sites on the eastern portion of the island. And it was a combination of roads, bridges, and culverts. And it actually required, it was multidisciplinary in terms of environmental, structural, hydraulics, and geotechnical. And in terms of details, this was a very fast-paced project. We had 3 field teams of 4 crew members, so 1 person representing each discipline, out in the field having to inventory up to, each team inventoried about 9 sites a day. And historically, this effort, just to go over the images there on the side, this effort back in the day, when disaster response, folks were primarily using paper forms. So as you can imagine, if you have 4 different people filling out 4 different forms on paper, and then having to get back to the, from the field back to the office, and then having to transcribe that, make sure they've transcribed it correctly, putting that into a report, it's a crazy process. And I can't imagine anymore having not done this paper to digital transformation that we really leveraged. So, we utilized iPads, GPS units. We did just use Garmin Glows. These were known site locations, so GPS wasn't important. And so we were actually able to create surveys for each discipline. And, in specific, since this is environmentally focused, we converted all the forms for, I think someone's typing right now, for section 10F, or 106, sorry, 4F, 6F, endangered species. And that was all able to be, input in the survey on the tablet, submitted in real time to a reachback staff we had sitting in the office, literally waiting for this data to come right back to them. And they could, someone finished a site in the morning, this information was submitted to our reachback staff, and they were able to start working on reports. And the biggest part of this was, once a site was assessed, it was a 7-day turnaround to deliver these reports to the FHWA. So that report process almost needed to start, instantaneously from when the sites were inventoried. So this, a huge effort. So you can go to the next slide. So you can imagine what the direct impacts and company impacts were for this. Thought it was really cool that image on the right-hand side is actually showing the quote-unquote office staff in Puerto Rico waiting for that field crew as they submitted their records. And I kind of worked in real time as the GIS analyst, managing the GIS platform and making sure I could export those records from Survey 123 into documents that this team could start reviewing in real time. So obviously direct impacts, streamlined data delivery and quality control. I mean, the data submitted in real time, we're providing the field crew with parameters, sometimes pre-populated where possible, and everyone's engaged and coordinated and on the same page. And, we have a bunch of people using GIS who don't even know they're using it and how much it's making their life easier. And obviously in terms of company impact, again, just like what everyone else is presenting today, we're setting precedents to leverage this geospatial technology. And, in return, we have a time and labor savings. And the client engagement is also huge. We're able to deliver quicker to them. We're able to have, quicker delivery time, and that way we can accommodate more requests as they come up. So Survey 123 was a vital platform for this case study. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you, Bridget. All right, well, next we have Scott with ESI.
Hi everyone, I'm Scott Denham. I'm the Wetlands and Permitting Manager for ESI. We are a consulting firm that's actually based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. We have offices in PA and Orlando, Florida. We're about 60 people full time, but we hire on a pretty large seasonal staff. We're big in the T&E surveys, mitigation design. Mostly a lot what I do is 404, 401 permitting and botany surveys. So we kind of branch out all over into the public and private sector. We use a lot of the different stuff that we're covering today. We're very big in ArcGIS, using Collector, Survey 1, 2, 3. We really got on the iNaturalist kick in the last year. Seems to be helping a lot of people out in the field, especially a lot of new people, and as well as using Ecobot. So for what we've done is we decided to pair up Ecobot with our EOS aerial units. That seems to be the GPS that just works out best for us and what we're using, and something that we've used for a while now. And kind of process on a couple of different smaller projects in this last year, and then we really pulled it out for a larger project. And it was the biggest test, I think, for us and for the guys at Ecobot to see, you know, kind of how it was going to help and how it was going to roll out. So you can go to the next slide, Jeremy. So for this project, and I do want to caveat this with, this is a fairly large project, so some of the numbers can seem a little bit more drastic than on a lower end project. However, we have saw similar results even on smaller things. This was a 50-mile linear transmission line in Alabama that we did this on, and for us, it was the paper data sheets is kind of was getting to us. We've had projects in the past where we have a lot of people out in the field. We're going out, we're doing the paper data sheets, we're having to come back and either rewrite them because of mud and water and everything else that you're going to get out of them, or just a flat out lost data sheet, transmitting them to a digital copy, or even just rewriting them out of a notebook. So we got Ecobot, and I equipped everybody with it. Everybody was going out on this project for it. And the biggest part of it was to see how fast it could speed us up in the field, as well as clean up our data on the back end. So on this project, we were doing a standard determination of the extent of jurisdictional wetlands and other waters of the US. We were pairing it up with some other T&E surveys while we were out there, but for the most of this effort, it was some of our lead biologists just doing delineations. And the biggest part of it was collecting our core data sheets and also seeing how much we could fill them out while we're out there. Most of the time you have to do a little bit of due diligence either beforehand or after the fact, just based on the data sheet and where the area you're at and how comfortable you are just filling out the top portions of everything with your counties and the project name and everything else. Well, with using Ecobot, you pull open the first screen, you enter all that data in, and what's great about that is there's a copy feature, a clone feature that's actually on the app. And so for that, then we can kind of go through each wetland along this entire line and clone a feature and have at least the top portion of that data sheet already filled out with surveyors' names and the county, the city, the project name, stuff that you have to keep rewriting over and over or have to do on the front end. So the biggest help for us on this one was collecting this data, collecting as much data as you can and filling out the sheet to almost its full extent in the field to save time on the back end, QA/QCing, and as well as being able to move up the line a little bit quicker. And then the data output from it is a PDF, a clean PDF of the core regional field form. And we were also be able to pull out GIS shape files since we had paired Ecobot with the ArcGIS and using our EOS system. Next slide. So what we found from this, and since this was a larger data set to actually deal with, we were able to complete ahead of schedule. On a project like this, everybody knows that they put out their budget. They're hoping that they get it done in a certain time frame. Obviously, weather and land access and obstacles like that are going to get in your way. So we kind of had an idea built into that, but we were able to complete ahead of our original schedule based on our land access and what we had. We were able to auto-complete 546 data sheets on this line. So this was a large data set, a lot of data sheets, data points were put into Ecobot. It made the team efficiently in the field. They were a lot quicker. Like I said, once you get to that first wetland and you start to see things, you're able to input a lot of your data. You're able to get your GPS coordinates to the point where you're standing, where you don't have to jump back and forth or write it off of the GPS. And for a lot of these wetlands in certain areas down there, they were similar wetlands. So they looked almost exactly the same with just minor details difference to them, a slight difference in soil or a slight difference in percentage of wetlands. So at that point, you're able to almost clone your entire data sheet and copy it over in a matter of seconds. And at that point, then you're drawing in your boundaries and just changing your minor details, your GPS coordinates, maybe your soil layer, things like that. So then it speeds up the field aspect of doing the data sheet that much quicker and just moving on to the next one. So we took time from going 30 to 40 minutes per wetland at times to down to 10, just based on it being so similar and not having to go down through the data sheet. And that was a huge impact for us. For us, it's, for each user, it was $250 a month for the users. At one point in time, we had about 9 people doing this, and for us, it ended up being a 42% additional profit margin on the project for the total budget, which seems like a high number because it is a high number. And we had very good success with this one, even on smaller projects of similar. We had, increased profit margins on what we were doing. And the biggest for us was the fact that it was less time in the field. And everybody knows that the less time you have to do to be in the field gives you more time to come back, make your data look better, and then also move on to your next project. And the biggest thing for us was making sure that we were able to continue moving forward. And we were able to do that by having less, about 10 less hours of QA/QC just from the PM level of getting the report together, sending the report, out then to the client, and it just being clean. These data sheets come through, they're PDF, they're nice and neat. You can kind of click through them really fast. You don't have to try to figure out somebody's chicken scratch writing on them or see a smudge spot from dirt or anything else. So that always was a lot faster for me to review on the end. And then for this project, it was about 50 less hours in the field from the field staff based on the field delineation itself and the office combined. It saved us a lot of time because we had less data sheets to actually copy over. We were able to save them to the cloud. We were able to save them to our server, which then is awesome because they could send me stuff faster than trying to scan it, just on a printer and sending it up and then having to decipher what we see on it and organize them together. We were able to get this nice, clean data set sent over, clean data set to the client that was appreciated. And then the core reviewers also like seeing how neat the data came through, as well as just a couple of hours of admin time saved, almost per week based on having to get it together, printing them out, scanning them in, just that process. And then, the cost of actually buying paper, buying ink, and putting it together, was a big save for us. So we've been very pleased with Ecobot. It is moving forward quickly with us and something that, we recommend, we've been utilizing, and it's been a game changer for us in the field for sure.
Great, thanks, Scott. So just as a reminder, our next webinar, we're going to be talking about paired GPS units with field applications with a little bit more of a stress on the GPS hardware, the GPS receivers. So just looking at how they pair with smartphones and tablets, how they work, levels of accuracy as well as functionality. And so then we'll again look at case studies in respect to field applications in wetlands. So that wraps up the presentation portion of our time here together. Looks like we've got about 15 minutes for questions and comments. I know some questions have started to come in. So again, thank you to all the panelists. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can pop back up in Brady Bunch style here. And I want to kind of just piggyback off the back of what Scott was talking about. And I want, since Scott already talked about it, I'm going to just address this to Bridget and to Kim. But I'm interested in, as your organization has utilized, has begun to step away from using more traditional pen and ink and paper to the utilization of data collection applications. How have you seen your organization's workflow improve, as well as the management of data? So why don't we start with Kim, and then we'll go over to Bridget.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I had to call in on my phone, and I apologize for any other technical issues, but my audio decided didn't work. Okay, so the data flow, well, for iNaturalist, I have to say that I don't, that has not been something that's been that widely used. Again, we only kind of just came out with it a year ago. I think folks that are using it at the Water Management District are using it more for helping with identification of species when they first see them, so getting to know them as sort of a guide or tutorial in that way. I had some people ask about the different projects, like if Florida Natural Areas Inventory is using it. I do not see that, but I see that the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission has very heavily using it, where they've opened up projects, and so they will share other people's observations in those projects. So resource agencies in particular, that one, FWC is using it. Like I said, we're using probably more on a personal basis. I know when it first came out, I suggested using it for some of our inventories to some of our land management folks, and their concern was the privacy of the data, especially regarding T&E species, and that's why I mentioned that, as that you can go ahead and keep that private if you want to keep that private. So in that regard, I think that iNaturalist has been more of a learning tool for us, and we're just kind of getting into it. That being said, some of the other applications that folks talked about with like ArcMap, ArcGIS, ArcExplorer, Collector, that our agency is using that quite a bit. And our collector has been really great because those that know how to set it up, get it set up for folks that are not necessarily tech savvy, and they can just tell them, this is how you enter the data. And so we have people that are doing invasive plant management, where they're doing helicopter surveys, and they're using the collector app while they're up in the helicopter to enter that data. So it's really streamlined that data flow right there and made it much more predictable than, you know, writing it down on a piece of paper or field book and then going back and trying to put it into ArcMap or something like that. So
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bridget?
Sure, thanks. So probably echoing a lot of what Kim just said, you know, going from this paper to digital transformation, our company has truly embraced it. You know, we have a lot of different disciplines and groups, and, you know, especially starting with the environmental group, you know, the sheer amount of data and the types of data that need to be collected, seeing that you could do that digitally and it could be clean, and it just doesn't feel as bulky as, you know, having to go out with that pen and paper and then do that middle interim process of transcribing. The benefits were pretty obvious, even, you know, besides the, you know, the other time or the labor benefits, or the costs of a project overall, just seeing the benefit in the field and how much cleaner that the data could be collected and then streamlined into GIS, since you know, our company has been using GIS forever, and it's always been primarily just to make maps. And now that we have these applications, whether they're this off the shelf or, you know, these custom standalone, we're showing them that you don't have to be, you know, a heavy GIS user or even the GIS analyst to be able to leverage these maps. You don't even sometimes realize you're using GIS. It kind of feels similar to looking in Google Maps or Google Earth. And as much as I don't like to promote those basic map applications, sometimes it helps to be able to talk to staff in our company like that and to show them, you know, whatever discipline you're in, we can, there's always a spatial component to it, and we can streamline it out of the paper world and just make everyone's life easier. And I think, you know, going with that transformation as well, that's what's helped more folks embrace it, is that they're seeing that, okay, you know, we give them the ideas initially of how simple things can be collected, and then the wheels start to turn of, okay, we can use this for project management, where, you know, I'm not the one in the field collecting the data, but I can still be a part of that field process and be able to oversee, you know, how my staff are doing this and, you know, how the project is progressing. So being able to kind of centralize everything, in that paper to digital using Esri has made what we like to call a bunch of our project managers believers in GIS and just the field apps in general. So it's been, I would say, nothing but success, and it's just continuing to be, evolve and be more successful.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so Daniel, I've got a question for you, piggybacking off the back of Bridget's response there. What are there any significant advances in Esri's software, the GIS suite of tools that you feel relates to wetland science? Like what's on the horizon for us as modelers and planners?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. That's a great question. I think that the biggest thing is something that we've all kind of been dancing around here, and this is the centralization and move to web GIS from more desktop-based systems. And with that, it enables data that is collected in the field to be instantly available throughout the entire organization. And people, say you have a field crew out, they come back, they upload their data at the hotel or whatever, and then everyone in the organization can instantly see that very same day. So that, in my opinion, and from the years that I spent in the field before I was at Esri, I think is the biggest sort of single advance is this kind of web GIS ecosystem. And then as far as specific updates, there's nothing I can speak to right now, but every bit of our software does have an update schedule. And so whether it's quality of life improvements or major releases, you can expect to see those usually between 2 to 4 times a year. That's
great. I know one of the things that we've been pretty excited about that we talked about with our Ecobot and Esri meeting a few weeks ago is the new integration has taken step to the next level and being able to record, your wetland units and cells out in the field. You actually see that in the Ecobot app, similar to like you'd be able to see it in Collector and be able to export those. And, just for a small one-day project, I was able to shave another couple hours off because I was able to just take what we had in Ecobot, dump it into, Arc Online, and boom, maps were done. That was exciting. I was like, wait, this took like 3 minutes to do this. This is super exciting. So it'd be interesting to see again how this new ecosystem of all these different pieces of software and hardware, how they come together. So yeah.
Well, just to add one more thing, one thing I'm very personally excited about is seeing what sorts of new analysis comes out of all this data. So we're in this situation where we have lots of folks going out and getting data. We're aggregating this data in a centralized form, and now it opens up very easy analysis that people can do. And I think that is going to be really interesting to see in the future what sort of trends and things we can find by leveraging this massive amount of data with the geographical analysis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess the next thing that kind of pings in my mind is thinking about the actual like hardware, like what we're on the ground with. We put up an image of a bunch of different devices that people are using now. I've been using the Tremble R1. I know a handful of other people that are involved here have also been using that. And so I guess my next question is I'm gonna pivot a little bit, and when your organization is determining what type of GPS device or receiver you're going to use, like how did you make that decision? And so I guess I'd love to hear from Jeff on that one. If you there, Jeff?
I am, yes.
Yes.
So as far as what specific devices we're using, our decision was primarily influenced by what we could get the Fish and Wildlife bureaucratic device purchasing process to allow. So we didn't want to have to deal with, I don't even know what the process would be to set up like a government phone line so that we could have cell data. So we have the GPS enabled iPads just with the wireless, so they can come back and upload the data when they're back at the hotel or gas station or whatever. We didn't really even get into like, what would we like to have? It was just, what can we get? What's the easiest that we can get with as little paperwork? I'm sorry if that might not be as
No, that's fine.
relatable.
I mean, I think that's important to hear from the government side in that. And so let's pivot and switch gears. So Scott, how did you guys decide to use what you were using? Looked like you were using EOS devices.
Yeah, we've been using the EOS devices. We've gone from the Era 100 units all the way up to their new gold unit. In the past, we've used the Trimbo Geo 7 series stuff. I think some of it's the size of the GPS itself, carrying it around, being able to use the EOS and Aero units and put it into Art Collector. It seemed to talk really well with it, and able to put our maps right on the iPad. And at the time, we were having to pull a lot of data into the Trimble. Since then, Trimble is definitely built on and made some other things, and we're actually interested in trying like the R1, some different things as well. But we kind of gotten to where it worked for us. It talked nice with Survey 123, it talked nice with Art Collector and different other things that we were using, and our data kind of came out clean, and then we were able to manipulate and edit on the back end with our GIS guys that really seemed to make that just the best option for us right now. Plus the size was a lot smaller and able to put on backpacks and walk around. So that's pretty big when you're walking up and down mountains, needing your hands to grab stuff. It's kind of hard to have a big clunky GPS or a pole with you at all times.
Yeah, great. Well, so one of the things that I think about, and so I know we're getting on 1:30, so if anyone needs to drop off, we're gonna still tackle a few more questions here. So hopefully you can stick around for a few more minutes. But some of us as scientists only use GNSS devices, GPS receivers occasionally, and so sometimes the cost can be really prohibitive on some of these units. And so in some conversations that I've been having with Darren recently is they're starting to come up with some more cost-effective solutions that may make sense. And so I thought, Darren, this might be a great time for you to just talk a little bit about some of those solutions that you guys have been coming up with that can allow more people to access those sub-meter accurate devices.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jeremy. I just noticed a question in the chat there. I think I'll answer that verbally. Jennifer had a question: does the Trimble R1 have the same accuracy as the GeoExplorer? The GeoExplorer came in several different accuracy levels, and it was upgradable. The R1 is a sub-meter device, so yes and no. If you had a centimeter level geo, no, it's not as accurate, but if you did have a sub-meter geo, they would be similar accuracies. Yeah, so to address your question, Jeremy, Trimble's been in the GPS game for a long, long time. And with the move from a all-in-one device like the GeoExplorer, we've seen the adoption of BYOD. So we've come out with a number of products to address that market. And the R1 is a small, it's about the size of a deck of cards, lightweight, all-day battery. And then the R2 is more feature forward, varying level of accuracies depending on what suits your needs. So between those two, and then something that we are promoting more and more is Catalyst, and that is a software-based GNSS receiver, which may sound kind of weird, but it allows for very inexpensive, high accuracy data collection. Right now, it's available for Android only, but we are working on the ability to support iOS. And this allows you to subscribe to the accuracy that you need based on your application. So if you need sub-meter, you can purchase either monthly or hourly usage of that device. And it really brings the cost of entry way, way down to the high accuracy GNSS world.
And the last conversation, Darren, we were thinking about maybe partnering on some case studies with that and exploring, see how that might pair with Ecobot, with iOS devices, etc. So maybe we'll have more to report back on that in the near future. So
Yes.
great, thanks, Darren. So I guess one of the other things that oftentimes we hear is in this changing environment, there's sometimes people have some fear, that maybe it's from Matrix movies, things like that, software and devices and hardware and et cetera are going to take over our job as scientists, and also kind of that some people may lose some of their skills because of utilizing the crutches of technology. So I thought maybe I would invite a couple other people to speak in here to that, just like what your experience with that is. And so Kim, I know we've talked about that in a few different respects, but how do you feel about that in terms of potential impacts of technology to our world of scientists?
I think I'm unmuted at this point, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I think there's several things that we've done. We're trying to use some remote sensing from satellite data and some other things like that. And just in regards to iNaturalist app first, when you view the suggestions, something that happens is that it immediately comes up with an answer that you think, yeah, that looks pretty good. And you're not doing all the things you have to do normally to identify, say, a plant. You didn't look at the seeds. You didn't look under a microscope. You didn't really inspect it. Therefore, at least in my experience, you don't remember it as much as you did doing it old school. So there is that can happen. It's great if there's somebody that already knows it and you don't have to go through all that, but you kind of lose that a little bit. Also, with the remote sensing from satellite imagery that we're doing, we're finding that you have to have that human component to it, that expert that can say, I know what's on the ground. The satellite imagery and whatever computer learning you're doing is not necessarily recognizing that right or correctly, and you need to train the computer to do the job. So I feel like you're never going to take the person out of this. We're never going to get to technology where we're completely out of the equation. It's just going to make it easier for us to be able to do our jobs and really streamline it. So
great, thanks. Well, so I'm gonna pivot again here. Daniel, we have a question about how an organization becomes an Esri partner, and what does that mean?
Great. This is more efficient than typing it out here really quick.
Right.
So the what everyone is referring to here is the Esri Partner Network, and there's different tiers and flavors of that. But essentially, it boils down to a relationship with Esri where there's a partnership around some software, whatever, maybe it's your software at your company or software that you want to develop. And then that is developed onto the RTS platform. And there's a wide array of resources and free software to help you do that and support through the Esri Partner Network, with the ultimate goal of going to market. And so Esri really wants to see everybody succeed. And so we try to bring people onto the platform and then connect them with key people in the industry. It goes on to Esri's version of the App Store. And then that network part, I think, is the really important thing, because it really is a network. So you are able to, you get, depending on tier, you get some conference passes, you get training, and it is kind of this immersive experience with the idea of getting people around that have common interests around common problems and kind of providing tools to solve them.
And I think that's what really brings us all together here, Daniel. Whether it's people from the Society of Wetland Scientists, private consultants, federal, state organizations, software providers, like we're all a member of the same community and all working towards the same goal: better planning, better management, better decision making. So,
and
yeah.
I just want to say one thing to Daniel, is that the Water Management District is a Esri partner, and they are going all virtual with their conference coming up in July. And so we are all able to register for that conference and be a part of the conversation and kind of exchange data, even during this COVID-19 pandemic. So that is something that's very helpful, being part of the Esri community.
That's a great point, and I'll be excited to see you virtually there at the summit. But for those of us who are still sticking around, if you didn't hear already, the Esri UC is online and free this year. So that makes it really nice for organizations that can maybe bring more people or some people without having to worry about the overhead of registration in hotels.
Yeah, and Ecobot will be there, so come and visit us in our first ever virtual booth.
It should be fun.
It'll be fun. We'll have a virtual glass of wine or something together, Daniel.
Perfect.
All right, so there's another question here for Darren in respect to the Trimble R1. Someone's having some difficulty with sub-meter accuracy under canopy cover using that. I'm not sure if you saw that in the Q&A, but they're wondering if upgrading to Trimble Viewpoint RTX correction service would help with that. Yeah, how would you like to respond to that, Darren?
Yeah, so the R1 is a smaller device. It doesn't have a large ground plane, and it's not intended for the very difficult GNSS environments. The correction source, which is Viewpoint, that won't really matter. It's still a matter of being able to see a clear sky. There are other devices out there that are more suited to difficult or harsh GNSS environments. The R2 from Trimble would be one of those. It can go up on a backpack, on a pole, on a backpack. The EOS Arrow that was mentioned earlier, also a better solution for those difficult GNSS environments. So you want something that's up above your body, something that has a large ground plane, and even still with all those considerations, in some places you're just not going to be able to achieve sub-meter. It's just the nature of GNSS. It's very weak radio signals coming from 12,000 miles in space. So it's next to buildings can be difficult, and under harsh canopy, you're just gonna run into difficulty, and that's where solutions like a laser rangefinder could help you. You could stand out in the open and shoot a laser at the target that you want to collect, and that eliminates a lot of the difficulties of capturing GNSS positions under canopy.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for taking your time to join us today. We're slowly having people trickle off, probably to go to lunch or whatever they're doing next. Really want to thank all of you who joined us in this conversation today as presenters and as panelists. Just wonderful to work with you all again on being able to offer this out to everyone who is interested. Nobody's getting paid to do this. We're all doing this because we believe in what we're doing. So I honor each of you for what you're doing in this world, and thanks for collaborating. I look forward to more. So we will be sending out some another post webinar survey at some point. Look for that from either Mike or Lee. And I'm going to turn it back over to Mike to close us out.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy, and thanks, panel. Really appreciate everyone joining today. The last piece that I just want to reiterate, as Jeremy alluded to earlier, as we're doing these this series monthly, we're next going to focus on hardware in the month of July. So sort of related topic with a little bit of overlap, and we'll kind of just transition into that. So we'll be out on LinkedIn and other places promoting that, and any of you that are on are certainly on a list already where you'll get an email about it. So look for that coming from us, and really looking forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks so much.